05. But right now, it's our good friend Congressman Michael Guest. He represents Mississippi's 3rd District. Good to have you in here, Congressman.
Gerard, great to see you again.
Well, it was an eventful Thanksgiving. I know you and Haley have been traveling around and trying to hit the football games. I know that's much appreciated. The Egg Bowl, of course, last Thursday, Thanksgiving evening in Starkville, and saw the great photos. And then you told me you were at USM.
Yeah,
right?
so we made the football circuit the Saturday before the Egg Bowl. We were at the USM Mississippi State game. Then the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving Day, and then we went down to Hattiesburg this past Saturday and saw the Golden Eagles take on Liberty. So one of the things that I love to do is love college athletics. You and I have talked a great deal about that, and I know you have share that same passion.
Yeah.
And so we got a chance to go around and watch some college football and to support all of our Mississippi teams this weekend.
Well, I know that you enjoy being back in your home state of Mississippi, but you got to go back when?
Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., so I'll be on the early direct flight back. Have been home now for about 10 days, which is nice. We've been in D.C. really since the August recess, so 10, 11 weeks straight. Now, I do get to come home on the weekends, but you're flying in on Friday, you're flying back up Monday or Tuesday, so you're not getting a whole lot of time to engage people back home. But I'll be flying up tomorrow morning. We've got a 3-week stretch that we'll be in D.C. before we'll take our Christmas recess, and so we'll be working for those 3 weeks. And then, of course, when we come back in January, we know that government funding will be something that we're going to have to address very quickly. Government funding will run out on a portion of the government late January, the other portion of the government early February, because of that laddered CR approach that passed. The entire government doesn't shut down simultaneously, and the intent was to try to make sure that we have the ability to vote on individual bills and that we are not, being the House, jammed by some omnibus spending bill out of the Senate, which is what has been the normal course of action over the last several legislative years.
Yeah. So give us an update, status of where we are. There are 12, in regular order, there are 12 separate spending bills to fund that discretionary aspect of government. How many have passed? How many, the House, that is, how many remain?
So we've passed 7 of the 12. The Senate has passed 3. So we have sent 7 of our spending bills over to the Senate. The intent is on the bills that we've passed, to try to go ahead and begin the negotiations between the House and Senate, because ultimately whatever we pass in the House, we have to marry up with what's going to be passed in the Senate. And we know that the priorities in the House are going to be different than the Senate. And so we hope that those discussions will take place very quickly, begin taking place hopefully this week, and will continue through the Christmas break, so that when we come back in January, the plan is, or the hope is, to get back to regular order where you're voting on individual spending bills.
Okay.
And you're not voting on all the bills, either all 12 together as an omnibus spending bill, which you often hear, or sometimes the bills are broken up into, say, 6 and 6 or 8 and 4. Those are often referred to as minibuses, but where we're combining spending bills together. You know, the great thing is, at least in the House, we've written our spending bills to lower levels than we saw last year. So we're actually going to see a decrease in discretionary spending, assuming that what we pass out of the House is ultimately the same top line that we see out of the Senate. And we've also put in there conservative riders, conservative policy positions in those spending bills. And so that's going to be the fight, to make sure that we keep that top line lower than we saw the spending this past fiscal year, and also to make sure that we're keeping those conservative riders in place.
Of course, Chuck Schumer, who essentially runs the Senate for the Democrats there, he's kind of made it clear in his communications that these bills that would, in fact, reduce spending, especially on the non-defense aspect of it, that he's not too keen on getting that through the Senate.
Well, you know, and the thing that works in Republicans' favor, if these bills are not passed and that they are not in effect in March of next year, there's a mandatory 1% spending.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the problem with that for Republicans is that's across the board spending. And so that would include things such as a 1% spending cut to our military at a time where we see global events at times seem to be spinning out of control. That would include a 1% 1% cut for our agents on the border, 1% cut to veterans. And so as Republicans, we would like those cuts to be passed through other spending bills so that we can continue to fund the military, continue to fund our veterans. Yeah. But if the Democrats say, hey, we're not going to negotiate, it's going to be our way or the highway, you're going to have to pass the Senate bill, take it or leave it, I believe that what you'll see is those mandatory spending cuts go into place, that we will fund the government through the next fiscal year with those 1% spending cuts.
You know, there are a lot of people in our state and across the country who are of the opinion when they see just sort of this dysfunction just in government in general around funding government, that just say, hey, if we don't get funding passed, some sort of, as we just did with the continuing resolution, if it means shutting down the government, maybe that's what we need. How do you feel about that?
You know, I think that while no one wants a government shutdown, it should not be something that we should take off the table. In Washington, D.C., as you're well aware, deadlines are the only thing that generally makes Congress move forward. Yeah. And we have seen that this Congress, we have voted on 2 continuing resolutions to keep the government open. I voted against both of those. I don't like continuing resolutions. It is a terrible way to run the government. But both of those resolutions passed with overwhelming Democrat support and about 50-50 Republican support. But we have to, if we're going to get spending under control, if we want conservative priorities, we've got to be at least willing to consider shutting down the government. And again, that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is for the House and the Senate to reach compromise and for us to be able to cut spending that would include some conservative riders. But if we're scared of a government shutdown, we're going to be in this continual cycle that we're never going to be able to get spending under control.
Well, is it accurate to say, Congressman, that the main issue with continuing resolutions, as opposed to the 12 separate spending bills known as regular order, is that there's really no discussion, there's no debate, there's no deliberation the way it should be in committees to form up these individual bills?
That's right, and we are continuing to fund the priorities that were in place when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker.
Yeah, we're just continuing it.
These last spending bills were written at a time in which the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. They have all of the policies that they wanted to put in these bills. They have the spending at the levels they wanted. And so if Republicans, conservatives, if we're going to make our mark on spending, we've got to get to the fact that we're getting away from a continuing resolution, because every continuing resolution, at least in my opinion, that is a win for the Democrats, because we are continuing to fund the government at their levels. We're continuing to prioritize the programs they want to prioritize, and we're continuing to have their policy riders in place. And the longer we do that, the bigger a win it's going to be for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the word is included in the term, in the name, which is continuing, which means continue what was already done, essentially, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, you know, I was frustrated, I guess, the fall of this past year, where we actually tried to pass a resolution that would cut spending. The resolution would have done several things. It would have cut spending. It would have had some policy riders in place to help secure the border, and it also would have established a long-term debt commission. We were unable to get that bill out of the House. I thought that would have been...
That was under McCarthy.
That
right?
was under McCarthy. And then once that bill failed for lack of Republican support, because we knew we weren't going to have support on the Democratic side, then McCarthy felt compelled to keep the government open, and we know that that's what ultimately led to him being removed from the speakership.
Yeah, and even though Chuck Schumer at that point said that deal's dead on arrival when it hits the Senate, still, though, it would have sent a message at least, and it would have established, I guess, the Republican agenda from a spending perspective. As I recall, it cut about $300 billion.
It did. You know, I mean, there were substantial cuts to programs other than defense, veterans, and homeland security. Yeah. Substantial cuts, in many cases, double-digit cuts from the prior year. And it was a deal that was negotiated by many members of the Freedom Caucus, the most conservative group in Washington, D.C. Byron Donalds was one of the lead negotiators, a very instrumental individual there within the Freedom Caucus. So you had Freedom Caucus buy-in. They actually helped write the legislation, but unfortunately we weren't able to get that bill across the finish line, and with us being unable to do so, again, at that time, Speaker McCarthy felt like he had to put a clean CR on the floor. It passed, and we're continuing to operate under those same principles.
That ended his tenure.
That's
as
right.
the
He's no longer longer the speaker.
We're up against a break right now, but if you can hang around, I want to talk to you some more about what's going on in Washington, and we'll also discuss something you've been heavily involved in, and that's Representative Santos there from New York.
Would love to.
We got Congressman Michael Guest in the Element Well studio. We're coming right back. So our guest is Congressman Michael Guest. He represents the Mississippi's 3rd District. We were just talking about this continuing resolution situation. Wow, so McCarthy's out. Mike Johnson ultimately becomes the speaker, and this is the first thing he's got to contend with. And this isn't easy. This is hard.
You're exactly right. He comes in with 3 weeks before a government shutdown. Now, I will say he was very quickly able to pass. I think there were 4 spending bills that he was able to pass after becoming Speaker. He was also able to pass out of the House aid to Israel. We know that bill is being held up in the Senate because the Senate, particularly the Senate Democrats, don't like the fact that it's offset by cuts to the IRS. They want that spending just to be added to the national debt. But Mike's been able to get some wins across the finish line very quickly.
Yeah.
But we have our work ahead of us when we get back. In addition to the spending bills we have to pass, we've got the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that we've passed out of the House. We've got to marry that up with the Senate version. You've got FAA reauthorization. You have FISA, which is expiring at the end of the year, and we need to reauthorize FISA, but with some guardrails in place to make sure that there's no abuse of the FISA system. And we also have the Farm Bill. Now, the Farm Bill was reauthorized in the CR to the end of next year, but we've got to work at putting together a farm bill.
Something very important in Mississippi.
No doubt. And an ag state like Mississippi, that bill is vitally important. We have regular communication with Farm Bureau on the farm bill. We're blessed that we've got 2 Mississippians, Trent Kelly in the House, Cindy Hyde-Smith in the Senate, who are in the room during those negotiations. But the farm bill is really only 20% agriculture.
Yeah.
The rest are nutritional programs, SNAP and other benefits like that. And so, it's not as easy as it sounds when you're just crafting an ag bill, because we know that the farm bill has been combined with those nutritional benefits. And so it's going to take some time. And so those are big items that Congress has on its plate that we need to deal with and need to deal with in a timely fashion.
Well, you guys, are you going to work on any of that between now and Christmas when you get back tomorrow?
I am hopeful that the National Defense Authorization Act will be passed between now and the end of the year, and I'm also hopeful that we will get something done on the FISA reauthorization. I don't think anyone wants to see FISA go away completely. I think it is an important tool, but again, a tool that needs procedural safeguards in place. And so those discussions are ongoing, and I hope that we will have something to vote on between now and the end of the year.
I don't think that reasonable thinking people, congressmen, believe that our defense does not need sufficient funding to protect our nation. I mean, that's the government's number one priority. But there are concerns. I'm sure you're aware that the Pentagon once again failed its audit.
And failed miserably.
Bad.
Yes.
What can we do about this?
That's going to be something that we're going to have to try to see what we can do to increase oversight. The Inspector General and others making sure that they're digging into the Pentagon's budget and the Pentagon spending, because look, we want to support our troops, so we want to make sure that they're the best equipped military force that we can put on the battlefield. We want to make sure that they have what they need to go fight battles and return home safely. But we also have to be very concerned with the spending within the military, particularly waste and fraud. And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
We have a great deal of waste and fraud that is currently ongoing, and money that should go into weapon systems is instead going into this fraud that we're seeing. You talk about some of the programs within the military, the wokeness that we see within the military. And I think everyone is so tired of that. We want a military that's not focused on, and it's not some social experiment, but we want a military that we can put on the battlefield and that can fight to protect our freedoms. And in a time in which we see in the Middle East, with what Israel is going through now with Gaza, we have the continual battle in Europe between Russia and the Ukraine over in the South China Sea. We see that China continues continues to saber rattle toward Taiwan. We are probably in one of the most dangerous political times internationally that I've seen probably since the Cold War.
No
and
doubt.
we must be prepared if our nation is called on to be able to send our troops to be able to fight to protect our freedoms. We hope we never get there. And one of the ways we don't get there is kind of the Reagan policy is, peace through strength. When people see America as weak, then they take the opportunity to act. And so if they see that we have the ability to defend ourselves, the hope and the goal is that will keep us out of conflicts across the globe.
Well, I think I represent our fellow Mississippians and certainly those in your district, Congressman, that we got to take this forward to leadership and say, guys, it's unacceptable for our Pentagon, which gets $800 billion a year, to not be able to account for all the money and all the assets that they've purchased with that money, which is why they failed the audit. So I'm asking you, I'm requesting of you on behalf of people, and I know you feel the same way, let's get to leadership and say, oversight, I think it's a great idea. We got to have an investigation into this.
Yeah, and people that are responsible, they've got to be held accountable. And I think that's what frustrates members of the public. I know it frustrates me, is when we identify people who are responsible for these things, they're never held accountable.
Exactly.
They're never fired. They're never terminated. Often they're promoted to another job, and that's just wrong.
It's totally wrong.
If there's criminal fraud, they need to be prosecuted. If it's just ineptness, they need to be fired. And we need to put somebody in there who can do the job and do the job correctly.
Well, your last comments there, that's something you have some experience with. So go to Mike Johnson and Armed Forces and say, guys, we got to do something about this.
Well, and, I will see Mike and Mike Rogers, who's the chairman of Armed Services. Of course, we know on the Armed Services side in Mississippi, we have the ranking member in Senator Wicker. Yeah. And then Trent Kelly also serves on the Armed Services. And so this will be something that as a Mississippi delegation that we will remain focused on. Again, the fact that they failed their audit and they failed it so miserably should be something that all Americans should be concerned, because that's our hard-earned taxpayer dollars being misspent.
Just because of the military, they don't get a pass on that.
That's right. Yeah. And and every year we're looking at increasing military spending because, again, we want to invest that in weapon systems and training. We're not wanting to say, well, a certain percentage of that is going to be misspent because of fraud or ineptitude.
Totally agree. All right, let's talk about George Santos, representative from New York, flipped a seat up there, seat that Republicans need to retain. You serve as chairman of the Ethics Committee. You've been very vocal, and your face and some of your statements have been broadcast, as they should be. This is a bad dude.
It is, just taking away just the general lies and deceits, that we know of. I mean, Mr. Santos lied about his education, both graduate school, postgraduate. He lied about his employment.
His work,
he lied about the fact that he had employees who were killed in a mass shooting in Florida. He lied and told people he was Jewish, and then later came back and said, "No, I'm Jew-ish." And look, those statements alone are troubling enough, but that's not why we're seeking to expel Representative Santos. There was an 8-month investigation conducted by the Ethics Committee. An investigative subcommittee was in panel. They interviewed numerous witnesses. They issued a large number of subpoenas, looked at almost over 100,000 different pages of documents, and they came to the conclusion that Mr. Santos, through a web of different accounts, whether it be his campaign account, his leadership PAC, his business account, and he had really an unregistered group called Redstone Strategies that was really an unregistered FEC super PAC, that he was enriching himself, that money was not flowing to his campaign, but money was flowing to him personally. And I think the report bears out some of the expenditures, paying his rent, paying his credit card bill, ATM purchases.
Botox,
luxury purchase at high-end high-end stores.
Ferragamo shoes.
Ferragamo, OnlyFans. So and the amount of fraud and abuse was something that is unprecedented.
Right.
We've never seen that before. And if Mr. Santos is expelled, which requires a 2/3 vote by Congress, he will only be the 6th member of Congress that has been expelled. 3 during the Civil War, 2 that were expelled because of federal convictions. And so he would be the 6th member of Congress, and so this is something, an action, if you will, that is I won't say unprecedented, but not something that we see on a regular basis. But I do believe that based on the extent of the conduct, that expulsion is a appropriate remedy.
Well, I know as chair of the Ethics Committee in the House, you've been leading the charge on that. I believe it was a subcommittee, right, that did the investigation.
Yeah, investigative subcommittee, yes,
that uncovered all this nonsense. But we need that seat. He doesn't need to be in Congress, in my view, but we need to keep the seat. We need to get somebody good to run in that district.
And other New Yorkers think that we do have a chance to keep that seat if he is removed.
Good. I think that would actually help.
No doubt.
Appreciate you coming on, Congressman.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Gerard.
Congressman Michael Guest represents Mississippi's 3rd District. Has been our guest on Middays. We're stepping aside for a break. Half an hour left in today's program. Stay with us.